I'm Jana.
And I'm Carol.
And this is the Real Talk Recreation Therapy Podcast.
On this podcast, we talk about real experiences and real research that back up the use of recreation therapy as a method of treatment for a variety of populations.
We try to keep it real as we address concerns and successes that we and other recreation therapists have had as we all navigate this awesome career field.
We don't have it all figured out, but one thing we know for sure is everything gets a lot easier when you can talk it out with a friend. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Real Talk Recreation Therapy Podcast. Today, we are going to talk about some of the service delivery models that our field of practice typically uses for when we structure the way that we provide our services. So before we get started, as a reminder, according to the National Council for Therapeutic Recreation Certification, which is our governing body, the people that say, okay, you've met the requirements to be a recreational therapist, recreation therapy, also known as therapeutic recreation, is a systematic process that utilizes recreation and other activity-based interventions to address the assessed needs of individuals with illness and/or disabling conditions as a means to psychological and physical health, recovery, and well-being. So that definition can be a little clunky, and we are hoping that by talking about some of the service delivery models that recreation therapy practice has adopted, we can kind of shed some light into the underlying workings of recreation therapy and how recreational therapists practice recreation therapy in various settings.
So this might be a little research theory heavy, but we're going to try and make it interesting and applicable to you guys. So we're going to talk about two models of practice today. There are several, but we're going to talk about the leisure ability model and the health protection, health promotion model. And we'll explain the model to you, and then if we can try and give you an example of how that might look in practice. Mm-hmm. So leisure ability model. So historically, it's been kind of tricky to create a model that serves all recreation therapy because there's ambiguity in the field. So we're getting into some like TR philosophy here, because there's some rec therapists that say wellness is the end goal of therapeutic recreation practice. And then there were some therapists that say, well, leisure is the end goal. So is leisure an arm of wellness? Yes, we definitely say that now. But there are recreation therapists who want to make leisure easier, more available, and attainable, period. Like their goal is not like, oh, let's decrease depression through leisure, or let's increase physical activity through leisure. Those are side effects, but the goal is leisure and making that available to all populations, which is a great goal. And then there are others that say, I want to make leisure easier, more obtainable, and accessible to various populations because it will decrease depression. And so that's kind of where this began. Is this model was created by Peterson and Gunn in the 80s because they wanted something that would cover everybody, but they were also more leisure oriented. And so this model is more geared towards like the end goal is leisure, is an individual being able to engage in leisure on their own. And so you can be frustrated with it. You can knock it. Everyone knocks it. This is probably the most well-known model, but also is controversial a good word for it, Carol? I don't know if controversial, but like the most debated. It gets knocked a lot because there are things that it definitely skipped, but it was the first one. So that's, it kind of jumps off of it.
And I think the nature of being the first model too is that a lot of the people that created these models said in their research articles when they were developing the model, this is a beginning, this is a starting point, and we hope that people will add to this and kind of grow from it. And when we talk more about some models, you'll kind of see where other models have taken the successes of the leisure ability model and then added things to kind of make up for some of the, maybe not the failures, but maybe added things in so that other models could be more comprehensive. Would you say that
Yeah.
that's a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. So it's a good basis trying to be a jumping off point for everybody. So models, when we're talking about models of practice, we're talking about how are we going to achieve the outcome. But in order for it to be better than Joe Schmo's good idea fairy and just someone walking in and saying, you know what I think you need, it has to be based in theory, right? And so when this model was originally presented, one of the things that um, it gets knocked for is that they didn't, in the original article, they didn't say like these are the theories that this is based in. And so in 1998, Stumbo and Peterson wrote an article where they kind of updated that and said, well, these are some theoretical bases that this could cover. Although, again, this model is meant to be vague and simple so that you could say, well, actually, I pull in this theory and this theory and this theory, and a lot of them work. But just so you guys know where this is coming from, so learned helplessness is one of the theoretical bases for it, which is that you learn that events are beyond your control, so you stop trying to change it. So you're injured, or you're sick, or you're depressed, and maybe you've tried to do things, but it's just not worth it to you, right? Or like you just don't know how to do it. And so you stop believing you can. Maybe in like post traumatic stress could be like a high end of this where like the attempts are causing stress or more trouble than it's worth, I guess. And so you just say, okay, it's not worth it anymore. So that's kind of the maybe people who are in this learned helplessness, either they don't understand what leisure can do for them, or they don't believe that leisure is for them. Maybe they were a basketball player, they got injured, and now basketball just seems completely off the table. They don't have like any sense of I could play basketball, or they're depressed and I cannot play basketball, that kind of thing. So that's kind of like the theoretical basis of where the client is and why they might need a therapist to help them to learn that it's not hopeless, that learn that there are options and adaptations. And what we want the client to get to overcome that are these other three theoretical things. So intrinsic motivation, internal locus of control, and causal attribution. These concepts are all interrelated, but basically intrinsic motivation is we want to do things for internal reasons. Like I want to be self-motivated. And so at the end of therapeutic intervention, we want the client to want to play basketball, want to do leisure, want to engage in leisure for its own sake. And we want them to have an internal locus of control, which is them believing that they can affect their like they are responsible for their own behavior, they are responsible for themselves. And causal attribution is they can control things. So basically we want them to want to do it for themselves and believe they can do it for themselves and have the self-efficacy to make that happen.
The opposite of learned helplessness.
Yes, right. Like these are all like things that they're like identifying that are like, this is great. If you have these, you're not in learned helplessness anymore. Choice is another really important thing in this model. We believe that like individuals based on in this theory is that individuals should have sufficient knowledge, skills, and attitudes to have opinions and choose. And for the general population, there we talk about like freedom from constraints. And so like you have enough time to be able to choose leisure. You have enough money to be able to choose leisure. When we're talking about people with disabilities, there's also talking about the freedom to participate, that they're allowed to participate because they have the skills, the equipment, the adaptability. And so these are things that we want to make available to them as well, so that they can have freedom from any constraints and freedom to participate because the activity is accessible to them. And then flow is a huge theory that you'll hear all the time in rec therapy, but it's this idea that there's this sweet spot where challenge meets ability, and we want people in that sweet spot because there are tons of therapeutic benefits. And so you don't want an activity to be so difficult that it's overwhelming or causing anxiety. And you don't want it to be so below their skill level that they look at you and are like, this is for kids and you're treating me like a child, or they're bored or something like that, right? So these are the theories that this is based in to try and get people from I cannot participate to I can, which goes into the leisure ability model.
Hmm. I really like how, was it Stumbo and Peterson are the ones that added the theoretical basis to the model? Is that correct?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so you can really see how, like, looking at the model under the lens of those theories, you kind of understand, okay, I can see within the theory, and we'll talk, or within the model, I can see within the model how clients are progressing and how they're gaining that intrinsic motivation and that choice and that flow. You can see where allowing clients to be able to actually have those things, they can progress from the state of learned helplessness to being able to be independent in their leisure. So we'll talk about what the model looks like now.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's perfect. It is really helpful to have that basis. So we will have a picture of this in our show notes over at realtalkrecreationtherapy.com to help you. But basically, there's 3 levels that we're going to have in the leisure ability model. And the first level is prescriptive activity or functional ability. So basically, before we can get into the fun stuff, right? Before we can teach you basketball, before we can teach you how to paint, before we can do the leisure, we have to work on just your functional ability to do each of those skills. And so this could be so I worked with a child that had autism and he was on a city basketball team. And so before we could teach him how to play on a team, there were some functional skills like he would he would run when he had sensory overload, and you can imagine a basketball court, there's lots of sounds and colors and lights and everything, and so he would run to the bathroom. And so before we could really even talk about before we could get too far into the ability like the basketball skills, we had to get into the being in public, being in this space skills. Before you have to make sure that they're cognitively, physically, and socially able to do these things. And that doesn't mean that you can't do that doesn't mean that the recreation therapist has to wait to come in until someone is like at a certain level to be able to function. No, you can use like we worked on those skills through a recreation therapy practice. But I guess the point is that here we're working on your ability to do the basic things. Um, like he would, if he tried to pass the ball to the other children and he'd throw it so hard it would hit the kids in the face and they'd start crying. And so like the functional ability to be able to control your movements when you're throwing a ball, and the social ability to be able to engage if you're doing a social activity, that kind of thing. So functional ability is the first level, like can they participate functionally in these things. The second is leisure education. So here we're going to teach the rules of the game, how to find opportunities, how to find equipment, answer the 5 W's like who, what, when, where, why. So we're teaching them about the activity. Maybe they've never played about this child. He was a kid, right? So teaching him the rules of the game. And for adults or people that are, their parents aren't driving them to the activities, how to find the activity, or even their parents too. Like you're looking for something that is inclusive, or maybe you want like an activity that is just for kids that have similar developmental abilities as your son. Here is where you can find the opportunities. So we're giving resources, we're helping them learn like about it. I think here also teaching the value of leisure is a really good thing, because if they understand that it's good for them, maybe that can help a little bit with that intrinsic motivation. And then recreation participation is the last level. And basically, our goal is they don't need us anymore. Like they've learned the game, they've learned how to do it, and we've done it with them enough that now they can do it on their own. And they are participating in leisure as fully as they want to. They have all of the skills to be able to do this as fully as they want to.
So talking about that model, if you're thinking about like how a recreation therapist practices within that model, oftentimes the recreation therapist is working in one of those particular, I don't know, would you say like quadrants of the leisure ability model? So If you're working in inpatient setting, most likely you're working on functional intervention and leisure education. Depending on how long you work with the client, you might be able to continue to progress with them up through to recreation participation. But a lot of people in that inpatient setting are kind of working more in that controlled environment where we're setting our patients and clients up with the skills so then they can leave and go and work in or go and participate in recreation. Now, the recreation therapists that work in that recreation participation space probably are more focused on setting up leisure opportunities for people, maybe working on inclusion. That seems like a good
Yeah,
explanation.
no, definitely. I think that's what I think of too, is that a lot of times maybe you're floating in these, and also I should say that when we start, a really important part of this model, going back to the choice theory, or the theory of like people need choice, because there is a theory called choice theory. This is just the theory that choice is good and that people should have the right to choose. But
Mhm.
we have a higher degree of control when we're at the functional improvement, and we let go of our control and give them freedom to participate as they go along this model. So in this functional, where you're just working on, can you move, can you do the cognitive, physical, and social things required to participate functionally, the therapist is leading the activity, is choosing the intervention, and it's controlled by them. And as we get into this leisure education, we're sharing it a little bit. They're choosing a little bit more. And then as we get into recreation participation, we're out of the picture. Maybe we're that just there as like an advisor, um, or maybe we're facilitating the activity that they come on their own to participate in. So I'm going to give you an example of a client I worked with that I actually did. I can walk you through how we went through the entire leisure ability model, and then we'll get into the health protection, health promotion model. So when I did my internship with the city of San Diego, I worked with an older adult with cerebral palsy. And he, when he came to us, he did have learned helplessness exhibited by not believing he could do things. He would often say, "Oh, I don't know if I can do that. I'm not sure." An external locus of control, he would, name other people or circumstances why he couldn't do that. Well, they didn't come, and so I can't do this, or because of the things that are happening to me now or that have happened to me in the past, I cannot do this. And so his goal was that he wanted to participate in recreation and make friends. And so we did like the assessment that we did like for the city of San Diego Therapeutic Recreation Services, and I also gave him the VIA character strength survey, which will come into play later. And we decided that he wanted to come to an art class. So he didn't know at this time like how to do these things. His physical limitations, he had pain walking. He walked with a cane, and in the beginning it wasn't a great cane, and I believe we like helped him get a better cane that had like the four stands as we went. So those were some like functional abilities like in the beginning. So his goal was to go to an art class. And some of the things that we started in the beginning when we're at this functional ability level, physically, we practiced walking so that he could increase his, because he could walk, he would walk, but he just didn't most of the time. And so he was wobbly and very slow. And so it was nerve-wracking because he didn't have a car. So the goal was that he would get himself to this thing, so he needed to take public transportation. So we practiced walking places, we practiced finding places like benches and things, how to take rests when he's walking across the street, making sure people can see you, making sure that you're, following the signs, all of these functional abilities. Cognitively, it was very confusing for him at first to understand the metro navigation, like just general navigation. And so we did activity to learn how schedules worked and talked about like, okay, if you want to be at class at this time, backtrack, how early do you have to leave? And so at this level, I like created a worksheet thing for him, like kind of like a game for him to like have all these resources. And then I sat with him and we spent 2 hours coming up with this and very slowly at his pace figuring out, okay, that means that I'm going to have to leave at this time when I want to go to this class. And that day we didn't go to the class. We just talked about what we would have to do when we went to the class. Socially, talked about what appropriate conversations he could engage in, appropriate compliments that wouldn't make people feel uncomfortable, how to recognize body language, and then emotional, with that external locus of control that he had and like feeling like the world was kind of against him. We needed to talk about things that he could do that he did well. And so at this level, we were just kind of, as we would go, we would talk about like, wow, you walked all the way from here to here. And so just this was very led by me saying, wow, I'm impressed that you did this, but trying to help him recognize that. So that was where we started functional ability. And then we moved to the leisure education, which is acquiring the skills and knowledge to be able to actually do this. So we continued to practice walking across the street so that he could do it in good time. There was an arch that once we got off the bus, he had to walk up this arch, and the grade was very steep for him. And so the first time we did it, we walked around the arch, but that was very exhausting. And so then we practiced walking up the arch and taking breaks and really just believing that he could do it, because it was mentally like the idea of walking up that thing was very overwhelming. And so it was just practicing it, making sure I was there to help him. And then cognitively, the first time I told him where to go and what to do, the first time we went on the bus, we took the buses, I went with him and I told him, we're going here, we're getting off at this stop. I would show him what I was doing, but I was pretty much just guiding him through it, because as someone that learned public transportation, I felt like it can be overwhelming for anyone. And so just having someone like confidently show you, this is how we get on and off the bus, this is how we push the buttons to get on and off, we started there. The next time I told him, and I would have him repeat it back to me, making sure that he was paying attention and aware and made sure that he knew what we needed to do. The third time, this was really fun. So this went back to his character strengths. I knew that from his character strengths that he really enjoyed helping people. And so I put a blindfold on myself the next time we did this, and I did everything blindfolded. So he was then guiding me, which was really fun. And so he was like trying to get me across the street safely. Obviously, with a blindfold, I could take it off at any time, right? So if it was dangerous, I could take it off. But he was escorting me. So I was there if he needed help, but he was the one saying, okay, this is the stop we're getting off at. This is where we're going. This is what we're doing. And that really gave him the self-confidence to be like, yeah, I can do this. She was useless this whole time. Like, I can do this on my own. And gave him also the cognitive ability of, okay, I know what I'm doing, basically. And then socially, we practiced using the skills on the buses and at class. Like, I would have goals with him, like, okay, you're gonna compliment 3 people, or you're gonna engage in conversation with 3 different people on the bus and on the thing. And then at first, giving more feedback, and then as we progressed, just like taking myself out of it and Kim have his own goals for how he wanted to do that. Emotionally, we did a what went well journal. So this is from positive psychology. You write down 3 things every day that went well, and then you write down why they went well. And what I was really trying to do was help him identify things he did himself that went well, because his locus of control was so external at first. And this was actually very cognitively difficult at first. And so at first, I would identify strengths and tell him to write it down. And then he would identify strengths. And then we spent a really long time working on him being able to credit himself for his successes. He was like, this is bragging. This is like, he was just very like sure that this was not okay to say I did well because I worked hard, kind of thing. And so this took a really long time for him to be able to do that. But by the end, he was better at being, I did this because I woke up early, because I did all of these things. And that was really cool. And when we first started doing the journal, I would check in with him regularly and say, hey, what did you do for your journal today? Or hey, did you do your journal? And as we progressed, we took that out. And so this is with recreation participation. So on the last day of this project that I did with him, this is like my internship case study project that I did. On the last day, he identified a class he wanted to attend and how to get there, and he participated without any intervention from me. So it was really awesome. I secretly followed in my car, like followed the bus, but he didn't know I was there just because I was a little like, I just want to make sure that if he needs something, I'm there, but he did not know I was there. So, he did it on his own. And I didn't intercede, like I didn't jump in at all. He got through the whole public transportation across San Diego on his own, got up the arch to the class all by himself, and participated in the whole class without any intervention from me. I was just like there at the end to be like, oh, this is awesome. And then yeah, with the What Went Well journal, we just did intermittent reinforcement, which in behavior modification is like the best way to stop the therapeutic intervention without them relapsing or doing it on their own. So basically, with the What Went Well journal, I just started being very unpredictable and having it take longer between when I would check in with him until the point where I wasn't checking in with him anymore. So at first it was like every day and then maybe every other day. And then it was kind of sporadic. Like maybe I did it 2 days in a row and then I didn't for 5 days. And then eventually I just stopped checking in and let him just do it on his own. Sorry for that really long description, but I hope that kind of helps to kind of see like this is maybe how you would take someone and start with like, what are we functionally need to work on, to getting the skills specific to the practice, to now they can do it on their own and participate fully in leisure.
I think it's cool that you were able to work with someone throughout the entire leisure ability model because, like I was saying earlier, oftentimes as a rec therapist, you're kind of only working within one of those domains. Like you might be doing strictly functional intervention and leisure education or strictly recreation participation, but it's cool being able to work with someone long term to kind of see how they're tracking through the entire model. And a lot of times the clients we work with, the skills that we give them in that functional intervention stage carry over, and then they're able to do leisure education in a perfect world where people are
Yeah.
continuing to work on the things that they're working on in one setting and moving that into a more natural environment. I like that. It was a good illustration
It
of the
was very
leisure ability
fun.
model in action.
And I would say that the therapists that work with the city of San Diego, they don't get to do this, right? Because they're doing the leisure, like they're like doing the participation, the leisure education. I did this because I was a student. And so they designed for this to be like, okay, yeah, we want you to work on all of these things. We want you to practice. And so this was my project, but I spent a lot of time. I think there was a whole day every week that was fully focused just on him. I didn't work with any other clients, which is kind of crazy in like a city recreation
Thanks for
program,
that
right?
point.
Like, and so is this a reasonable thing that I could do with working in that setting? No, I couldn't be that specific with it. So yeah, like Carol was saying, this being able to like work with someone through the whole model, it will really depend on what kind of practice you're in. Like maybe if you're doing private practice, maybe you could start with someone and like work through that with them the whole way. Or if you're if you work for a very cool company that is able to like give you all of these abilities to work with them, then you can. But yes.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to understand though where you're starting and where you're going to, because like we said, you're not going to get to work with the client throughout the whole progression, but having an idea of, okay, what skills do we need to develop at this level so that when they move on to work with another therapist or another provider or are out in the community doing their own thing, that they're set up for success to be able to kind of ease into that next mode of the leisure ability model. So having a big picture is really helpful for us as recreation therapists to kind of plan out the goals that we'll be working on with the clients and how we're going to execute them in a way that the client is able to track those through. And you have discharge planning, all that good stuff where you want to consider, okay, what are they going to go, where will they be when they leave the hospital or the inpatient setting, and what are the resources that we need to connect them with so that they can continue working through to eventually participate on their own if they're able to.
Yeah. So the next one that we're talking about, Carol's taking this one, the health promotion, health protection. This was created by David Austin, and this was one of the first responses to the leisure ability model. His thing was, let's take it from a leisure orientation and move it to a medical orientation, because that was and still is a big part of the field, and a big part of what recreation therapists want is let's be recognized as medical providers. Let's provide things to improve well-being. And so I guess like this is like it's going to sound very similar, but just think of it like he's trying to put more of a medical terminology, medical thought into it. And so whereas when I was working with this client, we identified things like his learned helplessness, depression possibly, but the focus was getting him to be able to participate fully in this art class all on his own, and not just the art class, but like be able to participate in leisure with the city all on his own, like he learned about like all the other classes too. And I knew that, this what went well journal would help like decrease symptoms of depression, but the focus the whole time was the leisure. And so I guess this is it might sound a little like I don't know, like technical, or like you're getting like really specific here. And yes, we are, because that is what these models are doing, right? That is what they're trying to say the difference is like the difference between leisure for leisure's sake and leisure for health's sake. Okay, I'm going to stop talking and let you take this.
Yes, and leisure for health's sake is important because health facilities are the main employer of recreational therapists at this point. So we want to be able to give more credibility to our field as a medical profession, and having this health protection, health promotion model kind of gives more of a framework for what we're doing in a more medical sense, so that the people that have that medical mindset, the doctors that we're working with, the hospital managers, they can kind of see, all right, this is how recreation therapy can fit into this setting and have a positive outcome. So when we're looking at the health promotion and protection model, it is a model of TR delivery that focuses on the use of prescriptive activity, recreation, and leisure to help people achieve the highest level of health possible. And so the highest level of health possible is what is considered health promotion. And it also is seeking to help people overcome barriers to health, and that's where you get the term health protection. And in this model, the focus of the professional is to meet the client's need for stability and actualization as the client moves towards independence. We're going to talk about some of the key features of this model, which I believe would be the theoretical basis, would you say?
Yeah, I think so.
Kind of how the leisure ability model talked a lot about learned helplessness and had this idea of the internal locus of control and intrinsic motivation. So a key feature of the health promotion, health protection model is that it takes a humanistic approach. Humanistic approach is the idea that people have an overriding drive for health and wellness, kind of assumes that people are they want to make the right choices for themselves. They want to do things that will improve their lives. Is there anything about humanistic approach that I'm missing?
This is from
Maslow's
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so he's got this triangle, right? And at the very bottom is physiological needs. And so basically, his theory is that you need to meet the things at the bottom of the triangle before you can get to the top of the triangle. The top of the triangle is self-actualization. And so this idea that the overriding drive for health and wellness is this bottom of this model are the physiological needs and safety, security, shelter. And so it starts with like before anyone is going to be interested in doing things that are self-actualizing, which is where you get into flow and meaning and happiness, and like before you can care about those, you need to be your physical needs need to be taken care of. You need to, if you don't have enough food, you're not going to care about basketball, like is basically where this is coming from. And so they're starting with, we need to meet people's health needs and like physiological needs and needs for those things before we can talk about self-esteem and self-actualization. And so, yeah,
so if you have a client who's in the hospital who's being treated for a heart condition, before they're able to meet with a recreational therapist, they're going to have to be stabilized and be in a condition where they're able to do recreation and leisure. And as they progress through and get healthier and stronger, the type of leisure that they're doing will probably change based off of their functional level, what they're able to do at that time. So that's where, when you see recreation therapists working in a nursing home setting versus a physical rehab setting versus a community setting, you'll see different types of recreation happening just based off of what people's functional level, what they're able to do and handle.
And what you're trying to like help them be able to have, right? Like at the level where they're just trying to work on being able to breathe, you're going to like do different things, right? Like maybe you're listening to music, maybe you're doing things to make breathing easier, maybe meditating or something.
Yeah.
Once you get to the level where like the heart is working and they can exercise, well then let's exercise to keep the heart healthy. And so yeah, it's this idea that we can't come in with our own agenda and like ignore the person in front of us and their needs. We need to look at what are their needs and how can recreation therapy meet those needs.
hmm So the health protection, health promotion model has three different realms. And when I look at this model, I see the leisure ability model because this model came from the leisure ability model. So you see a lot of similarities. So that first realm is called prescriptive activities. Can you scroll down again?
Mm-hmm.
So under prescriptive activities, this is when clients are first starting out with a rec therapist, they may not have the motivation or the means to engage in leisure. That's kind of where I was talking about. If you're not in that healthy state where you're able to get out of bed and do things, the type of leisure that you're going to be able to do is going to look very different from people that are not in a hospital bed, that are not at a lower functioning level. And so this is where the recreation therapist will provide activities to start experiencing feelings of success and mastery, and to take the client and give them a chance to kind of feel like they're having a sense of control, even though they may not have a sense of control over other aspects of their life. For example, they're not able to control where their health is at. If they're in the hospital, they might not be able to control when they're going to get out of the hospital, but being able to give them activities that will promote just a sense of control, like they can be as basic as having a choice of what to participate in. If I'm giving you options, then at least during that leisure time, you're able to choose what you want to do. And that kind of is one step in the right direction towards gaining that sense of control. Also, if you think about hospital settings, because again, this is a more medical model, clients that are, for example, on a locked unit, they don't necessarily have the ability to choose what they want to do. The unit may not have the means for lots of recreation. For example, the hospital. So I currently work in inpatient psych, and we don't have an outdoor space for our clients to go. We pretty much have an art room and a living room, multi-purpose space area. So the activities that I'm able to do in that setting are very limited. They're also limited off of safety. So we want to make sure that the clients are staying safe. So we're not bringing in any sort of recreational equipment that could be dangerous to the clients or the staff. And so that's where me as the recreational therapist, I'm the one who's choosing the activities, but the overall goal of those activities is to promote a sense of mastery in the clients, to give them space to just kind of experience some sort of fun.
Self-expression.
Self-expression is a big one. Yeah. Just being able to give them an experience that kind of promotes more of a sense of control, maybe promotes some self-confidence, maybe allows them to break out of some of the cycles of worry that they're in just by helping them be mindful in the moment. They're not really choosing to do this. I'm providing it to them, but some of the benefits are allowing them to kind of get closer towards feeling more like themselves or feeling more positive, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I think you said it really well. Like, and it makes a lot of sense, right? When you're in that kind of setting, you can't say, "Hey guys, what do you want to do today?" Because they either cannot tell you, they don't care, they're like, right, their needs, the safety, security, and shelter, like in inpatient psych, maybe they don't feel safe. And so they're not going to be in a state where they're like, you know what I've been really wanting to do. And they might not know what would be helpful, but Carol is able to provide activities that she knows will promote these sense of mastery, safety, security, can meet those needs, I guess, and help them see that.
Yeah. And when you're working with a client who's in that health phase where they are maybe depressed or just feel really down and low about themselves, they're not going to have the motivation to want to choose to do activities for themselves. But the hope is, even though you're kind of like if you invite them to do the activity, they will choose to do it. And then when they do the activity, they might realize, oh, I actually enjoyed that, or I felt calm while we were doing this, or I felt like I was able to express myself in a way that I haven't been recently. So even though they're not exercising a whole lot of choice or freedom in choosing the activity, they're still getting positive benefits from doing that leisure in a way that might promote them to, oh, I really like that feeling. How do I continue to have this feeling through recreation and leisure in the future as they gain more control back over their lives and are able to do more? Then we switch into the recreation stage of the health protection, health promotion model. So through recreation, clients begin to regain their equilibrium that was disrupted by stressors so that they may once again resume their quest for actualization. So, under this humanistic theory, as the client is moving through that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're at the hospital, they're starting to get their needs for food and safety and health met. They're moving up in that model. Eventually, the top of the model is self-actualization. So we're not quite there yet. We are starting to have them participate at a higher level in recreational activities. They take part in intrinsically motivated recreation experiences that produce a sense of mastery and accomplishment within a supportive and non-threatening atmosphere. So if you're comparing this to the leisure ability model, this is very similar to the leisure education aspect of it, because here clients are exploring different forms of leisure. And here we use the term recreation. And this model is funny because they differentiate recreation from leisure, where in a lot of people's heads, those words are interchangeable. But so they're at that phase where they are choosing more recreation, they're exploring more recreation, but the recreational therapist is still a big part of facilitating those experiences and allowing the client to kind of have more success and to learn the skills that they need to eventually be able to participate in recreation on their own.
I kind of think of this stage like where we worked, Carol, at the soldier recovery unit, right?
Mhm.
Because we had like a big list of activities for clients to choose from. And at this point, they were out of the hospital, like when they were
Yes.
with us. And so they were able to choose a little bit more, but there was bounds, right? Like we provided all of the recreation, we provided all the equipment, we like made it as easy as possible for them to be able to participate, and we managed the risk
Mhm.
ourselves. But they had tons of options. And so as they're trying to on this quest for actualization, as they're trying to find like what is meaningful to them, what is motivating to them, what is bringing them joy, they were able to choose from activities that we had, and they had freedom within those activities to do. Our activities were very easy to model to the client's needs. So, like, for instance, we still planned the bike rides and still did all of this, but if clients, wanted to go on a longer or shorter bike ride, we could easily modify that because we had so many staff working that we could help them, and if they wanted to go somewhere that we were like is not safe, we could teach them like, no, this is not a good place to go, but if you want to go back, we can go this way. Or I guess so it was, we're still there, we're still helping, but they have a lot more freedom to like pursue in like this, like Carol said, like a supportive, non-threatening atmosphere.
Yeah, kind of a controlled environment where we are providing the clients with a way to gain new skills and restore their health, get back into activities, just help them to, I guess, according to the model, this recreation phase is an adaptive way to restore health and wellness, where they're not necessarily learning about themselves as a person so much as they are just like getting back into the swing of doing things.
Yeah, physically improving their physical, cognitive, emotional health, like all of that, using activities to improve that. And we would get that from people all the time. Like that we would have goals for them, whether it was like physically, like, yeah, I want to get back to where I was before, or I want to be able to run, or I want to be able to pass this, military test, or emotional goals to be able to engage with the world, right? Like a lots of PTSD, so be able to engage in leisure and decrease anxiety and things like that. And all of these things like were modeled to help them reach those therapeutic goals. And we worked with a treatment team to reach those therapeutic goals. So yes, like obviously, maybe not obviously, but as recreation therapists and knowing that leisure is an arm of wellness, we were okay with them doing it for leisure's sake, but that's not why we were there. We were doing it for health promotion, health protection, right? Or that's not why the military hired us to like contracted us to be there, I guess. Like the military the military hired us for health protection, health promotion, right? And we worked with a treatment team to how can we meet these, and how is recreation meeting these. So again, it's very easy to like blur the lines between these two, but in this model, right, we're continually going back to, is this promoting health? Is this protecting health?
Yes. So from the recreation stage of the health protection, health promotion model, then you get to the final stage, which is leisure. So this was one of the criticisms of this model, is that the second stage was recreation, the third stage is leisure. And in a lot of people's minds, especially those that are not therapeutic recreation professionals, they're like, those words are the same. They mean the same. But under this model, leisure is a means to self-actualization because it allows people to have self-determined opportunities to expand themselves by successfully using their abilities to meet challenges. This is kind of, when we're comparing it to the leisure ability model, this is that recreation participation phase, which again, further makes it confusing because you're like, okay, but you said that it's leisure, not recreation. But basically, this is where people are truly choosing the leisure that they participate in. They are growing as people. They maybe identify strongly with the leisure that they're in, and they're doing things because they're intrinsically motivated to do those things. They're getting a lot out of it. They're feeling like they're mastering something, and they're experiencing that self-actualization where they're the highest form of themselves, basically, through the leisure that they're doing.
Yeah.
So the core elements of leisure is that it is freely chosen and intrinsically motivated. So according to David Austin, who developed this model in 1996, typical therapeutic outcomes include increasing personal awareness, improving social skills, enhancing leisure abilities, decreasing stress, improving physical functioning, and developing feelings of positive self-regard, self-efficacy, and perceived control.
Yeah, so this is like again, like they're very similar, and so like you can also apply the theories from the leisure ability model to this, right? They're freely choosing the leisure for themselves. They have that internal locus of control, and they, with Haslow's hierarchy, they are now at self-actualization. They are now like able to have flow experiences and be able to, I guess, at the highest level, they're at the highest level of health. Their physical needs are met, their needs for safety, security, and shelter are met, their needs for love and belonging are met, their self-esteem has increased, or their self-efficacy, which is their belief in their ability to do things, and now they're able to live a meaningful life, which is what the actualization stage is, like nirvana.
Yeah.
Maybe not
So
nirvana.
looking at the health protection, health promotion model, when you go into our show notes on realtalkrecreationtherapy.com and you're looking at this model, you'll see that it does look very similar to the leisure ability model. On the x-axis of the leisure ability model, what is changing is the client's basically level of control, where the client is going from having no control. The recreational therapist is the one who's calling all the shots, kind of directing what the client is doing, to the very end of the x-axis where the client is in total control and they're the ones choosing it. Now, choosing what activities they do. Now, if you look at the health protection, health promotion model, that x-axis is the level of health. So you're going from poor health, death, all the way up to optimal health. At the same time, the client control is also changing. So the idea here is that combining health outcomes with recreation and leisure, as the person is meeting their needs for health, their health is improving, they're just choosing more forms of leisure because they're self-actualizing and they're intrinsically motivated for that leisure, and we're considering leisure to be part of wellness, having effects in other domains. We're taking care of their physical health, we're taking care of their social health, their emotional health, spiritual health, all those good things. They're kind of meeting that optimal health for themselves through the model. There's some other TR models that are a little bit more modern that we'll talk about in a later episode that kind of explain this more. Like, this model doesn't particularly talk about the different domains of wellness and how they relate to leisure. But the idea here is that through allowing clients to engage in leisure at an increasingly higher level of control, then they're able to improve their health.
So those are the two or those are two very basic beginner models, and they're great. I'm glad that we're doing this one first, because as we talk about more models in the future, having this basis will be helpful, because if you understand like that this is where TR started, the other ones will help and make more sense, and you'll appreciate them more. You'll be like, wow, this is like covering so many more things and getting more specific, and that is really just, kind of how it's evolved in the field, is that we started with the leisure ability model, and then that model has been fine-tuned and built upon, and then the health protection, health promotion model really pushed to how can I frame leisure ability in a medical model. And then the future models, it will be fun to go through and show you how recreation therapists are using these models in their practice. I definitely, doing this episode and going back to studying these models, I definitely appreciate them more, getting back into it and being like, oh yes, because in practice I don't think about them. I don't think about I don't want to say this in a bad way. It's not that I don't think about the theoretical basis. It's that maybe I take it for granted, if that makes sense. I know that I'm working with people through learned helplessness. I know that I'm trying to increase their intrinsic motivation, but it was refreshing to go back through and read the research articles of the people who created these models, and we'll put these in the show notes, and remind myself when they were creating this, what they saw and why this was so important, and why it was so good that we developed these models, so that we have a better than, Joe Schmo's good idea fairy plan, like, so that we have a good model, whether it's clinical or in a less clinical setting. We have models of practice that guide us and make sure that we are actually providing therapeutic recreation, and not just activity directing and facilitating.
Yeah, so there's a quote that when I was reading about the health protection, health promotion model that David R. Austin helped develop, he said, models direct and describe practice. And I think after having worked as a recreational therapist, I can appreciate how these models do direct and describe the practice that I'm doing. I think when I learned about these models as a student, it was very theoretical. But now that I've actually had some time to work in the field and kind of apply these things that I'm learning, looking at the work that I do under the view of the model, it's easy to see where the services I'm providing fall within the model and kind of have that big picture. So the reason that we are refreshing you on these models is kind of so you can see where, as a recreational therapist, you fit into that model and kind of see where you're going with your client, and maybe just have more of a theoretical basis for what you're doing, and like appreciate that the work that you're doing isn't just random recreational activities you're choosing. Like if you're following these models and these goals, you can kind of have more of a systematic basis for the services that you provide.
Yeah, and you'll be able to describe to other medical providers and your administration why you do what you do and why it's important, because they're always going to want to know that. If they're going to take you seriously, they're always going to need you to make sure that you're describing it in a way that is more than we're just doing things for fun, or we're just taking it out. Like the leisure ability model, you could argue that the goal is that they're just doing things for fun in the end. But why are they just doing things for fun? And then you can talk about, the that this will increase their internal locus of control, internal motivation, and flow, and that all of those things, if you're working in a health setting, all of those things are things that they're trying to promote. And so yeah, so if you're wondering, like, why as a recreation therapist, like, do I need to have this reset or why do I need to care about the models? I would say it's because not only does it, increase your validity, but it helps other medical providers. It helps you speak the same language as the other medical providers, and it helps them understand what you're providing that the clients need, and how you can provide things that are beneficial. And I think leisure education is something that everyone needs. I know I definitely needed it when I was a student, I don't think I appreciated leisure for leisure's sake nearly as much as I do now, having worked with clients and seeing the benefit of leisure for leisure's sake. And so, even as a recreation therapist, I think I benefited from learning more about the benefits of leisure. And that is probably true of other professionals and stakeholders, that you'll be able to better describe to them why this is important, and be able to describe to your clients why this is important and why this is going to be beneficial to them. So, all good things.
All right. So all of these models that we talked about today are going to be in our show notes for this episode, because I think if you're able to actually look at a picture of the model, the two models we talked about today both look like XY axes with lines going up in inverse correlation. So it'll remind you of your middle school math class, but there won't be any y equals mx plus b. It'll be theoretical concepts that make sense. So go to our show notes at www.realtalkrecreationtherapy.com and look at these models for more of a understanding of what we're talking about today. And we hope in the future to have a few more episodes on the other recreation therapy models and kind of talk how other professionals have added to the theoretical basis and have improved different models that might make more sense in different settings, or just kind of fine tune how recreation therapy actually works.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye. All right, everybody. As always, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Real Talk Recreation Therapy. If you're looking for some of the information that we talked about today, you can find it on our show notes at www.realtalkrecreationtherapy.com. And if you enjoyed this episode and some of the other episodes we put out, we would love to have you like, follow, subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on whatever podcast platform you listen to us on. Thank you so much for your support, and we hope you'll join us for the next episode. Bye!